Driving his monstrous 300km/h Porsche at Silverstone, Brock is red hot. He recorded pole position on a 1:14.3. Beside Brock on the front row of the grid is the outside chance 1979 Australian touring car title holder Bob Morris, back in a Mazda RX-7, 1 minute 14.5 seconds. On the second row of the grid is the lad from Liverpool, Steve Masterton, in the controversial Ford Falcon. Masterton's best time yesterday, blasting around Oran Park, 1 minute 14.8 seconds. Lying in third position in the Australian Touring Car Championship from Wollongong in New South Wales, driving a Mazda RX-7, is Peter McLeod on a 1 minute 15 seconds. That's half a second slower than Bob Morris. Last year, George Fury recorded pole position at Oran Park for the Australian Touring Car title. This year, he was 0.1 of a second faster, 1 minute 15.1 in the Nissan Turbo. Alongside him on the third row of the grid will be the cat amongst the pigeons in today's race, Alan Grice. A welcome return in the Holden Commodore, a 1 minute 15.3 seconds. On the fourth row of the grid is the man who leads the Australian Touring Car title, Dick Johnson, disappointed yesterday in practice to record only a 1 minute 15.4, but that's still 0.6 of a second under the lap record. Alongside Johnson will be Warren Cullen in the Kmart Commodore, a time only 0.1 of a second slower, 1 minute 15.5 seconds. The youngest man in the top half dozen drivers is Steve Harrington in the Holden Commodore, a time yesterday of 1 minute 15.8 seconds, and he too was under the lap record. And alongside Harrington is Terry Finnegan, the specialist Sydney driver, who now has sponsorship and therefore can contest the Australian Touring Car title, 1 minute 16.1.
If some of those names, cars and drivers, sound good enough, imagine then that you've got Jim Richards in the BMW on the 11th grid position, Murray Carter on 12th, Andrew Harris on 13th, Fred Giesler 14th, Mike Bergman 15th, Gary Wilmington 16th. A really sensational class field. Should be a tremendous race. Will be very hard. Bob Morris still with his door open. The door closed at 10 seconds. Peter Brock, pole. 5 to go. Long circuit, starting to creep Masterton and Cullen. Cullen got a bad start. Masterton a brilliant start and will hit the lead without any shadow of a doubt. Blasts off Bob Morris, who tries to slot in. Johnson going with him. Brock, though, is between the two of them. So it's Falcons 1 and 3, Commodore second, and no, Falcon fourth, as Bob Morris, Mazda, goes third.
Under the bridge for the first time, Peter Brock comes out of the slipstream. He has to get past Steve Masterton.
Because if he doesn't, Bob Morris will want to have him very quickly. Masterton a half loose, Brock through, Morris also.
Now Masterton's got a problem because the heat that's generated by Bob Morris's car is great, and it can cook the Ford Falcon very easily.
Johnson, a great start, much better placed than I think they expected. A lot of people say Johnson not a potential race winner. The champion deposed last year by Alan Moffat, the winner the two previous years. Peter McLeod, Steve Harrington.
Terry Finnegan.
Former Brabham single-seater driver.
1 minute penalty.
Steve Masterton. Nasty surprise coming round for him. Will probably put him off. He's slowing anyway as Johnson goes by. Masterton in trouble. Behind Finnegan, we've got Cullen, Wilmington, Harris. So Grice hasn't come out of it very well.
Brock 1.02 seconds in front of Bob Morris. 1 lap down, 34 remaining. Steve Masterton goes to the pits. Great disappointment for the Sydney driver. Peter McLeod being harried there by Steve Harrington.
Second at surface, McLeod. This the pack further back. Brock,
Morris, Johnson, McLeod, Harrington, and Jim Richards is in the pits as well, and George Fury.
Here's two that didn't fare well in the opening lap. We didn't see them up front, and look at Morris flinging the Mazda around. Johnson's third now, with Masterton going out.
Dear oh dear, shades of Simmons planes all over again when both Fury and Alan Moffat stopped on the first lap, and now some of the quality field taken out before the race really gets underway. 1 minute penalty being given again.
Warren Cullen, who was behind his teammate Andrew Harris anyway. coming up for completion of lap 2. And it is the flying Peter Brock from Bob Morris, Dick Johnson, Peter McLeod, Steve Harrington, in 14, Terry Finnegan. But this man in flying form, and what a difficult mission Peter Brock has. He's dropped one round, and so in the series, he's sitting quite a long way behind Johnson. He's on 73 points to Johnson's 91, but Brock drops another, the second last round at Lakeside, when he competes at the Le Mans 24-hour race in 3 weeks' time. So he has to really optimise his points here. Johnson, on the other hand, says, I've just got to stay cool, collect some, not let Brocky's margin get too great, and do well in the remaining 2 rounds.
Alan Grice also heads for the pits. There he goes. So Gricey's out of the motor race as well. Could it be the heat of Oran Park today? It's far hotter than people had expected. And it is a warning for tyre wear later in the event.
Bob Morris, 2.33 seconds only in arrears. And remember that around this Grand Prix circuit, although Morris is chucking the Mazda very ferociously around the place, we've got Mazda also in 4th with Peter McLeod behind Dick Johnson in 3rd.
New lap record for Peter Brock, 75.34 seconds. He's taken half a second off Alan Moffat's best time last year.
Peter Brock this morning was doing a 14.4 with full tanks and race tyres.
He is red hot at the moment. His drive in the Porsche 956 at Silverstone 2 weeks ago has done him no harm at all. Steve Harrington goes to the pits. I hate using the word, but the attrition rate is unbelievable.
It really is amazing that we could lose Alan Grice, George Fury, Jim Richards, Steve Harrington in the opening moments, virtually, of a 92-kilometre race.
Peter Brock now through Castrol Curve. On his 4th lap, about to head out of number 5. Bob Morris falling back behind him. Likewise, Dick Johnson, who's coming under some threat from Peter McLeod in 4th position. Alan Grice is back on the track, but laps down.
Yes, but sitting in what looks like 5th place.
There's Morris. That's the ex-Barry Jones car. Morris bought it earlier this year when he was approached by some potential sponsors. He was doing a wonderful job with it. There's the dice for 3rd position between Dick Johnson and Peter McLeod. Johnson leading the Australian Touring Car title on 91 points. McLeod in 3rd position on 57 points. McLeod still in points contention if a miracle occurs.
And 2 positions worse off than when they were dicing at Surfers for the lead in both the opening part of the race but also the latter part.
McLeod's fitted a rocket engine to the Mazda RX-7 for this event. And is really hoping for a race win here.
Behind Johnson and McLeod in 3rd and 4th. In 5th place is 14, Terry Finnegan.
Johnson winding on heaps of oversteer there. That will start to cook the rear tyres pretty quickly, and Johnson had bet to become very much smoother or he's going to forfeit 3rd position on tyre condition alone.
5th place Finnegan, 6th place number 8 had penalised 1 minute, Warren Cullen. Behind him Gary Wilmington, and then in 18 Murray Carter, and 53 Chris Clearahan, the sports car driver, in the ex-Peter McLeod Mazda RX-7.
Johnson on the biggest tyres in the event, 19-inch rears. They measure about the same distance across as well. But he's using them up mightily as he tries to hold off Peter McLeod.
This is critical to Johnson because he wants as few people as possible between him and Brock. His actual placing doesn't matter so much as long as it's not too far distant from Brock. Brock's lead,
3.3 seconds.
Morris is 3.3. And back to Johnson is 3.17.
Our 80 gets the black flag. That's Ken Harrison's escort.
A massive blow-up by an RX-7 Mazda who's putting...
It's Murray Carter. It's Murray Carter. After years of driving Ford Falcons and experiencing all these sort of blow-ups, he's back where he started
and
from.
He was right on line over the dog leg, so if he's laid any oil, that will be treacherous.
Bob Morris there going out of picture. Behind him, the dice for third position between Dick Johnson and Peter McLeod. Here comes Carter into the pits. It's like old home week for him, really. He was getting sad without having to work on his engine.
Massive job for the Mazdas to get past a car like the Falcon. Morris was talking to me about it yesterday. He said the only places really where we can pass are perhaps down at Castrol Corner, and then they'll blow us off again as they come down the straight. But a lot of the circuit is too tight for even a faster car through the corners to get by. Not only do they need to get by where they're quicker, but then they need some more section of track that suits their particular cars to enable them to capitalise on the advantage and build a buffer. This is one point, and it's done.
Now the grunt from the big Ford Falcon on the way out of the corner.
Brock out of the race. Peter Brock pulling out of the motor race, and so his chance of winning a touring car championship just about shot as he pulls off the track. Brock, the leader, the winner in 1980 and in 78 in the championship, and way back in 74 now with Missingmill around at Lakeside, almost certainly out of the championship.
Brock was on his 8th lap.
The race leader is Bob Morris, a wildcat, one of the wildcats in the field, because he has done no other touring car championship rounds this year. Johnson now looking to be beautifully placed and will be much less concerned about Peter McLeod now than he was a lap ago.
And now McLeod has the potential for victory. Morris has an Achilles heel in this motor car. His gearbox is a standard gearbox, and look underneath Murray Carter's car there, the oil leaking from underneath the front of it. And that rotary is certainly not rotating at the moment.
So let's recap on the race order. With 8 laps completed, they're out on their 9th in this 35-lap race.
There's Brocky walking away.
And he's got a sponsorship cap in the car. Now that's real professionalism.
Mind you, he intended using it for something else.
Yes, you could take it as some degree of pessimism as well. But on their 9th lap now, it is this man, Bob Morris, in the Mazda RX-7 ex-Barry Jones from Peter McLeod, another Mazda, Dick Johnson Ford Falcon, Terry Finnegan, Holden Commodore, number 8, Warren Cullen, penalised a minute, so further back, Gary Wilmington, the man who was involved in the Moffat incident at Surfers Paradise. Then in 53, Chris Clearahan, and in 33, Mike Bergman, as we see another of the one of the Kmart cars, Andrew Harris, pulling off.
Bob Morris has a critical problem with this motor car. He's running almost a standard gearbox. He's got to be terribly easy on the gears.
A bit busy on the wheel there too, as the escort really, I think, didn't know he was there.
If he comes under pressure from Peter McLeod, it is possible that Morris's gearbox could go. Morris is on his 10th lap.
A very interesting possibility. Peter McLeod on Bob Morris, I think, shouldn't be ignored. McLeod, much more familiar with what you can do with the tyres of a Mazda over the distance of this race. He was 3rd in this race last year third in the Endurance Championship here last year to George Fury and Dick Johnson.
gap from Morris back to McLeod is 2.77 seconds. There's McLeod. You saw Morris go through a picture just a moment ago.
Would be a tremendous bonus for McLeod if he were both to win the race and to finish in front of Johnson. He's on 57 points to Brock's 73, Johnson's 91. So it's still a tough task for him. He has a car that's known as the most reliable in the series. That's the situation with 25 laps remaining. And McLeod fairly certainly catching Morris, who's put in an electric spurt early on. But just the consistency, the man that a lot of people were impressed with up at Surfers, doing very well. Perhaps the best race he's driven so far since starting racing in 1980, Peter McLeod at Surfers. Looked very definitely a potential race winner. So for that matter did John Harvey and Alan Moffat, and of course the eventual winner Dick Johnson.
News from the pits. Steve Masterton had his water pump belt fall off, and the car's now too hot for him to be able to put it back on again. George Fury was in some sort of difficulty out there, and he just walked into the commentary position.
George Fury, you were just one of many that fell out in the first laps. What happened?
Well, I'm afraid that Alan Grice used me for his brakes on the first corner. I had the inside running, and he just seemed to come up 20 miles an hour too fast and
hit you in the side or the rear?
Hit me in the side. Yeah.
And what damage did he do?
Well, he broke my left-hand tyre rod, and I had no steering on one wheel, so we had to put it away.
George, that's the sort of luck you really can do without. After pulling out of the last round at Surfers, doing a lot of development work, how was the car shaping for this weekend?
Well, I thought today we were going to go very well. We had some quite fast times at warm-up this morning, and I was sure that we had a good chance in the race.
You were fastest qualifier here last year, and you won the Endurance Championship round here. Is it a circuit that suits your car?
I guess so. I like it here personally, and it does suit a smaller car because it's a fairly tight circuit. I was really looking forward to a good race for a change.
And do you know what happened to the other cars, to the Jim Richards BMW?
No, I don't know about Jim, but Masterton dropped a fan belt of some sort, and he had water problems.
Well, very bad luck, George Fury. You had enough troubles earlier in the year getting the car right. A lot of work's been put in since Wanneroo with dropping the Surfers round, and the disappointment, I imagine, of dropping out of this one through no fault of your car, the car or yourself.
I mean, this is motor racing, and we've all got to put up with it to some degree, but you can't help the disappointment.
What about Lakeside then, 3 weeks
Well,
in?
we'll be there, and we hope to. That'll be my first run at Lakeside, and I hope that we can do well there.
Look forward to seeing you.
Thanks.
.96 seconds is the gap from Bob Morris back to Peter McLeod in second position. And a car into the fence. It's not a good spot to be.
That's Les Gross in the Capri, and it's the bottom corner just before the bridge, the slowest corner on the circuit, so in that sense drivers probably make better arrangements to get round it, but it's right on line.
That's the man who got the black flag a little while ago, and he's involved in some dispute with the organisers. Bob Morris, the race leader. And he's a happy man. And he's slightly opening his advantage on Peter McLeod out to just over 3 seconds now.
He's maintaining it very well, Morris. His last appearance here, believe it or not, it's hard to imagine of a man that's running so well. We look at 39, John Bundy's Mazda RX-7 coming into the pits with problems. The last time Bob Morris ran here was when he debuted in the Seiko team with Alan Jones, drove the Falcon that Alan Jones didn't like and won the endurance round here. Prior to that, he hadn't done very much for a couple of years. He really, in a consistency sense, has been out of motor racing for nearly 4 years. But has always been a very quick driver, and of course was Australian touring car champion in 1979.
Has the ability to dial himself straight back into action again as well.
And Bathurst winner, of course, in 1976.
The one man who's not here this weekend is Alan Moffat, who was injured after crashing at Surfers Paradise 2 weekends ago. His team manager is with us at the moment, Alan Horsley. Alan, how is Alan Moffat?
Very good. Naturally, he's still pretty sore, but it looks like about another 6 weeks before he'll have his arm out of plaster. So,
how long after that before he's fit?
Well, I'm not too sure, Will. I believe that he'll need a fair bit of exercise on the hand before he can get back into the car.
The major part of the car, of course, a write-off. What can be scavenged from it?
Very little, really. It was a fairly substantial stump that we hit there, and very little of it is can be salvaged.
So when do you expect your next appearance?
Well, as I said, I really can't tell you at the moment until Alan's out of plaster and we know how his hand is.
Well, very bad luck, because Alan Moffat is an absolutely 100% effort man in terms of touring car racing, well, motor racing generally.
And speaking of effort,
his absence greatly missed here.
Speaking of effort, coming under a lot of threat at the moment.
Presence greatly missed.
Coming under a lot of threat at the moment is Dick Johnson from Alan Grice, who's more than a lap down, but seemingly unaware of the fact that he's a midfield runner now.
In fourth place behind Johnson is Terry Finnegan in number 14.
And here goes Grice.
Best placed Holden Commodore. Grice intent on making life uncomfortable for other competitors, and Johnson fairly intent that it not worry him.
Well, Johnson would be best to stay right out of any urges to take on Alan Grice, because it's not going to do him any good in the championship fight.
Johnson sandwiched by retirees, because Steve Harrington behind him is another who's had a call to the pits, and so the car's either side of him. We look at 53, just recovering from a spin.
Chris Clearahan, sports car driver.
Chris Clearahan actually running in 7th place. Sorry, 9th place. Or he was. Completed, and now on their 17th for the race leader, Bob Morris, Mazda RX-7 number 10, followed by Peter McLeod, Mazda RX-7. They're the leading pair. Number 50, Dick Johnson's third in Falcon number 17. Fourth, Terry Finnegan, Repco Accessories, Holden Commodore number 14. Fifth is number 8, Warren Cullen, but penalised a minute. And sixth, Gary Wilmington, Falcon number 11.
2.32 seconds is the gap between first and second position. So McLeod again starting to close up.
As Craig Harris comes into the pits in the Brian Burt Ford Capri. And Morris really doing a superlative job. Only about his third outing in that Mazda RX-7, and they've done absolutely nothing to it under the bonnet. Doesn't have a gear ratio chart for the car. And doing a tremendous job. Saw earlier on, he really was chucking the car about with enormous vigour.
Dick Johnson 10.03 seconds behind Bob Morris in third position.
Gap 1 to 2 is 2.55 seconds. So fairly constant. And let's remember, with 18 laps remaining, so that's a very small gap indeed, with that much time for Peter McLeod to work on the problem. Morris running Avons, Peter McLeod also running Avons, Dick Johnson, of course, on Dunlops.
That's the Capri, Craig Harris, the 18-year-old driver from Queensland, who undoubtedly in years to come will be a man to watch.
Finnegan on Dunlops, so the leading two cars at the moment on the latecomer to the local motor racing scene, Avons. Tyres which Peter Brock decided not to run on today. He did use them at some stages during qualifying, and this morning he ran his car very hard for about 5 laps in a warm-up, full tanks and race tyres, and in this case Avons, and was started off at 14.4.
Morris really working his car, as indeed he should, with McLeod posing the threat that he does.
Yes, cannot relax.
McLeod.
It's the gap. Bob Morris, the man pioneering the way through the cars at the tail end of the field, and he therefore is the first to notify them that the field is coming. Usually drops a little bit of time by comparison with the cars behind, who have an easier passage.
Big crowd here at Oran Park today for the 5th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, an event which on paper had so much promise. What a great shame to see so many of the drivers drop out as early as they did.
McLeod falling out to about 2.7 seconds behind Morris,
who's sloping along at 79.03 seconds that lap, which is more than 3 seconds outside the new lap record held by Peter Brock. Morris is on his 20th lap at the moment with 15 remaining as he overtakes Joe Moore in the old Ford Falcon. McLeod, a more urgent means of getting through the traffic. Must be careful not to pass there under the yellow flags for that car in the safety fence.
BMW back out on the track again, Jim Richards. Cullen seen very briefly there, holding down 4th place in car number 8.
Terry Finnegan really sliding sideways in 5th position as he sets out in pursuit of Cullen.
So those cars, that's the gap from 8 to 14 between 4th and 5th.
And to say that Finnegan's tyres have gone off is something of an understatement as he slides about.
Situation on the track, of course, but Cullen has a 60-second penalty from moving at the start, so effectively is probably behind, certainly 5th behind Finnegan, if not behind Gary Wilmington. I think Wilmington would have him covered.
Finnegan, with new sponsorship, has allowed him to contest the Australian Touring Car title. Bob Morris in the lead. And Morris's lead extending now to 4.38 seconds from Peter McLeod. Morris over the top. It's at this point of the race that a driver starts to assess just about everything that's going on in the motor car. Morris will be feeling out the tyres to see just what sort of grip they have got remaining. He'll be looking after the gearbox, and I tell you what, he is not mucking about. Quite a fast exit to that corner. And he opens up to 5.55 seconds in front of Peter McLeod, and his tyres are going off. That is, Morris's are.
It's about 5 seconds, really doing a great job. And a fairly adventurous move by him to get into an improved touring car in the last less than 1 year of the formula. Mind you, he got in fairly cheaply, and because the cars are becoming worth less and less, there's the man that's trying to catch him but doesn't seem able to. A man lying third in the championship, Peter McLeod. A crash in the opening round at Sandown, 2 fourths in the following rounds, Simmons and Wanneroo, Tasmania and Western Australia respectively, and then a great fighting second place, close, very close to a victory at Surfers Paradise in that very difficult and slippery race, as Joe Moore comes into the pits from the tail end of the field. Dick Johnson has had 2 second places, a third, and victory at Surfers. Peter Brock, 2 wins and a second of the races he's contested or finished. Didn't contest the 4th round and failed to finish this one.
Interesting, though, that the drivers, while they contest 7 rounds of the Australian Touring Car title, must drop 1 round. Now, Johnson so far has finished better, 3rd or better, in every race he's contested. If you drop his 3rd place points, 20 points, which are the worst that he's achieved so far, he drops to 71 points. If he picks up 3rd today, that takes him to 91 points in the title. And if Peter McLeod finishes 2nd, he'll take 80 points. So on corrected points, there'll be just 11 points between Dick Johnson and Peter McLeod. That's theoretical, of course, because anything can happen to Dick Johnson in the 2 remaining rounds, and he may get to drop a worse round than a 3rd place. McLeod, of course, didn't finish the 1st round of the title at Sandown in Victoria when he was taken off the track on the opening corner by Andrew Harris in the Kmart Commodore, when Harris used the back of McLeod's car as a braking marker.
The retirement of George Fury at Oran Park through a minor accident was not only unfortunate but unusual. Team manager Howard Marsden was telling me yesterday there's some carnage occurs at Amaroo. They have been taken out of races with accidents 8 times at Amaroo Park since in the last couple of years. You need a big kitten, I think, to get the bonnet of Brian Walwell's Ford Escort open. As we look at 2nd place McLeod. What can he do? 11 laps remain. 24 have been covered. They're on their 25th.
Dick Johnson, incidentally, is 27.24 seconds ahead of Terry Finnegan in 4th position. So Dick is under no threat whatsoever to take certain 3rd place points, and must at this moment be relying purely on a problem with one of the 2 leading cars to be able to move up 1 place, because he is, again, certainly no threat to Peter McLeod at this stage. Johnson's been unhappy with his effort all week. His fastest times were recorded on Thursday, and he's been going backwards ever since, and can't work out why. His brains trust, Wayne Eckersley, the former Alan Jones mechanic, and George Shepherd, the former Holden dealer team rally man, have been searching desperately for the solution to Johnson's problems, but to no avail.
5.92 seconds, the gap from that man forward to the race leader, and his lead over 3rd place on margin 8.75 seconds. So the buffer 5.9 seconds behind Bob Morris. Another situation with 10 laps remaining, 26 kilometres remaining in round 5 of this Australian Touring Car Championship, the last year for cars in their present, very highly modified configuration.
And for Alan Moffat, undoubtedly watching this at home in Melbourne, it must be doubly frustrating to contemplate just where he could have been in this event. Steve Harrington comes to the pits for the second time. Unusually, with this Group C coming to an end at the end of this year, the Harrington team announced yesterday that they would build a brand new car for the James Hardy 1000 at Bathurst to be driven by Harrington and Alan Grice. One wonders what they'll do with it a month later when the category comes to an end.
Adventurous Bob Morris, 6.6 seconds now in the lead over Peter McLeod. Steve Harrington is out of the Roadways car. Father Ian Harrington, an expert in building roads down in Tasmania, advising the new Oran Park owners on track reconditioning and perhaps relaying.
Undoubtedly it can do with it. The new owners are here today in force, having a look at their acquisition, which they take over on June the 1st. And they've announced that they will certainly maintain motor racing at Oran Park and are looking to do quite a number of spectacular things, not the least of which is a drag strip, as Castlereagh Dragway is now closed. Perhaps a speedway in the bowl, all of which augurs well for Oran Park, a circuit which has been under some sort of a cloud now for a number of years, and certainly in jeopardy. You're passing the housing, or Bob Morris is driving through the housing development right now, if you listen to some of the rumours.
It's often been under rain clouds too, as I remember.
Indeed, in the halcyon days of Oran Park, this crowd here, which is monstrous today, by comparison with recent years, would have been very small compared to, say, 10 years ago.
Alan Grice there, the man that George Fury says hit him, put him out by breaking a tie rod. Third place, Dick Johnson, the Falcon, number 17, the leader in the Touring Car Championship. Fourth place, still on the road, is Cullen, but behind Terry Finnegan, who's running fifth on the road. And then Gary Wilmington. Behind Wilmington is in 33, Mike Bergman. Then follows in 88, Fred Giesler. 26, Bill O'Brien. 53 is Chris Clearahan. 47, Dean Lindstrom in a Mazda RX-7.
6.74 seconds is the gap from Bob Morris back to Peter McLeod.
Gap from McLeod to that man Johnson is in excess of that, for around 10 seconds. Although Johnson is going to miss out on maximum 25 points for he could have got for a win. He's still going to be better off than Peter Brock, who is the man of most concern to him, although Peter McLeod will narrow the margin. Among the front runners, Johnson, one of few that have completed so far all rounds. Another one, Warren Cullen. And I think they are the only two, in fact. They're the only two in the first 4 rounds that have got points in every round. Dick Johnson and Warren Cullen.
Morris records a 78.36 second lap, which is again some 3 seconds outside the new lap record, but quite consistent with the way in which he's driving this event at the moment.
He's coming up to lap 7th place, car number 33, Mike Bergman. And Peter McLeod's got trouble, and he's slowing on the straight. And very bad news for the Slick 50 car. So as Bob Morris roars away, Dick Johnson suddenly is in this position to inherit second place and to look very strong indeed.
Morris is on his 30th lap, 5 remaining.
This is Bergman that is in 7th, now 6th.
There's McLeod going again, but going terribly slowly down the straight and hugging the fence as if perhaps he was trying to pass a message to his pit team, to his pit crew. But certainly he's charging across the bridge at an undiminished pace. Morris is currently on his 30th lap.
Well, perhaps that was only a temporary fault, but McLeod went very slowly out of Castrol Corner, jammed in gear.
He dropped back 11.1 seconds behind Morris and is now just 4.7 seconds in front of Dick Johnson. So if it jams in gear again, or he has a problem, Johnson's there waiting to take over second position.
11.5, as you say, behind the race leader, Morris.
There's Johnson looming in the background. So the story of the jammed gearboxes, in fact, falls not in favour of Peter McLeod. It was Bob Morris who was supposed to be in jeopardy in that regard. And there's Johnson now. He can see McLeod in front of him. It's worth 3 points if he can overtake him. And we'll also give him a little extra prize money, about enough to pay for one time.
Gap back to Johnson in third. Is that enough perhaps to tantalise Johnson to try and pick him up? But I think you'll have to rely on more problems from McLeod.
3.7 seconds the gap. McLeod back to Johnson. Johnson clipping the side of the exit of the corner there. He's trying to put a lap on him this time round.
Again, second and third place cars there. A gap that once the driver sees another car in front on the track, it really does spur him on, even if he's got a race plan that says don't try and catch him.
Johnson's been cruising for a few laps though, so his tyres should be in pretty good condition and he can afford to have a go. Using the grunt of the big Ford Falcon out of the slowest corner on the track. More torque than half of the Mazdas in the field put together.
Interesting point to contemplate is whether Morris's performance here today, perhaps a win, might entice him and his sponsor to contest the remaining rounds of the championship, to go to Lakeside 3 weeks hence and to Adelaide 2 weeks after that.
Johnson telling a slow car to get out of the way then. He's definitely chasing the Slick 50 Mazda.
And Morris, the race leader, has now lapped Gary Wilmington in 6th place. So only 4 cars unlapped by the flying green and white car number 10.
Johnson pulls a lap of 78.17 seconds.
Lap car behind Dick Johnson.
And is 2.57 seconds behind Peter McLeod.
And there's only 2.5 laps remaining for Johnson to come up from 3rd place.
Pretty comfortable for McLeod really, but the Ford fans in the spectator areas are going wild for Johnson. While
gap between McLeod second and Johnson third is minor. It's 11.3 from the race leader Morris back to McLeod. McLeod to Johnson, though, is 2.34 seconds. Down the straight goes the big grunty Falcon, 5.7 litres. Revs to 7,500. Big engine, but Dick revs it very, very hard. And does appear to be pulling ground on McLeod. Certainly would love to come up into second place to make it 3 second places, 1 win, 1 third.
Less than 2 laps remaining, and Johnson is really trying.
So's McLeod.
He knows he's in some jeopardy.
1.8 seconds. They're on their 34th lap. Will this be a hero finish by the Queensland hero? As Morris completes 34 and is on his final. People are starting to cheer even in the pit area as Johnson's out after McLeod, 1.3 seconds behind.
Morris is 10.94 seconds clear of this dice.
Down the straight, Johnson dives deep and pulls up onto McLeod, and the race leader, though, off into the tight, slow back section of the circuit.
There they are. The race for second position, 11 seconds behind the race leader Bob Morris. Dick Johnson now starting to get sideways. Perhaps his tyre's going off. Only half a lap remaining.
It's going to be a drag race to the finish. Down at VP Bend will be the first chance for overtaking. Dick's got to give it everything until then to try and make up ground in a section of track that really suits the Mazda.
Slow car in front of Peter McLeod. Can it balk him as they go up into NGK corner? Does. But equally, if McLeod gets through, and he does, it'll balk Johnson over the dog leg. Here comes Bob Morris to the finish line. 1 second only. Johnson not close enough, gets balked. Morris crosses the line, wins the 5th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship as McLeod fends off Dick Johnson, who cannot do it when will come home third, but will remain in the lead in the Touring Car Championship. So the finishing order is Bob Morris from Peter McLeod, both Mazda RX-7s. Morris having his first run in the championship this year, and Dick Johnson, the series leader, coming home to a well-earned third. Race time, 45 minutes and 35 seconds, and an average speed for that man, Bob Morris, of 119.9 kilometres an hour. Gary Wilmington, you saw waving there, came in 5th place because the finishing order behind those three, Morris, McLeod, Johnson, was Cullen in car 8, Holden Commodore, Terry Finnegan in Commodore number 14, but Cullen had been penalised a minute, goes back from 4th place on the road, and Gary Wilmington 6th in the Falcon number 11, followed then by Grice, worked his way up to 7th place, car number 6. From 33, Mike Bergman, another Mazda, 88. Fred Giesler in a Holden Commodore, and 26, Brian Bolwell in a Ford Escort. Well, what a great effort by the Kangaroo Valley driver, Bob Morris, who virtually retired from racing to a rural life. Last appeared here 2 years ago to take an endurance championship win in a very difficult car to drive. The Falcon, owned by Paul Jones at the moment, crashed at Amaroo last weekend. But Bob Morris shows he's got all the speed and the form of any of the front runners virtually in the Touring Car Championship. A great effort by him. Qualified equal 4th with Fury in practices yesterday, but then went out in the second session and was only 0.2 of a second slower than Peter Brock. A great effort. Alan Grice pulling by, and any moment now we'll hear from the race winner, and it'll be a very delighted one, I'm sure. Perhaps a rather weary one, Bob Morris.
John Smales is down there.
Bob Morris, congratulations. A long time between drinks.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
Well, it always feels good to be a winner, and because it takes a lot of people to make a winning combination. Peter Malloy told me that once that the driver's only 5% and the car's 95%, and it's the guys that put the car together that are the other 95%.
Bob, did you expect such an attrition rate at the outset?
Well, I didn't really know who was falling where, but the idea was to get in and push as hard as we could, and you know, I guess something did fall off Brock's car. I saw it fall off under brakes, and whatever fell off went straight off the end of the straight, and I knew he was in plenty of trouble.
Were you feeling fairly confident on Brock at that time?
Yes, I was holding him fairly easily. I was looking after the tyres, and I knew it was only a matter of time before, you know, he used up what he had and we could move in for the kill virtually.
Will we see you in the last 2 rounds of the touring car title, Bob?
Well, not unless the promoters have got plenty of money.
This is the situation after 5 rounds then in the Touring Car Championship as they go to the final 2 in Queensland in 3 weeks' time and to Adelaide 2 weeks after that. Dick Johnson and Warren Cullen in 1st and 4th place are the only 2 who have scored in all rounds and will therefore have to drop a round. But even if they did that, they still return their 1st and 4th place, although Johnson comes back to only 11 in front of Peter McLeod in 2nd. But what did happen to the early series leader, Peter Brock?
Peter, the hard luck story of the race, what happened?
Well, the tail shaft broke, this particular item here. Well, we haven't broken one before, and one presumes you're always going to break something sometime.
Could the surface crash have done it?
Yes, I think probably it strained things a little bit. We were just talking about it a moment ago, and that probably is strained it, yeah.
Well, here's hoping you don't have the same problems at Le Mans in 2 weeks' time.
No, you're hoping I can do a few more laps.
Peter, thank you. And while Peter Brock is at Le Mans in 2 weeks' time, we'll be at Lakeside for the 6th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, now led by Dick Johnson from Peter McLeod in 2nd position. On behalf of Will Hagan, John Smales for ABC Sport.